Hello there everyone, it's Carol here from the Crafty Emporium. I just wanted to come by to show you a couple more bits and pieces to do with the stash busting. But first of all, I want to show you how I go about dyeing some seam binding, and you'll see why this becomes relevant to the stash busting in a moment. So basically I've got some off-white seam binding here, and I've got two distressings. So I've got old paper and antique linen. All right, so what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to do some splodges of the ink onto this silicone mat, and this I got off Amazon, but I got it from the kitchen section. I do tend to find that if you look for products in their natural habitat, so like if you look for stuff in the craft section, you'll find it's a lot more expensive. So sometimes it's better to look for things in slightly unusual places, I should say. Okay, so I've got my splodges on my mat, and I've got some sporter. I've got some water in my spray bottle, if I could speak properly, and I'm just going to spray this with some water. Now the other thing that I want to do is I want to just give this seam binding a little bit of a quick spritz as well, because if I leave it completely dry, it tends not to absorb the ink as well, so it forms that what you call a capillary action. So it'll spread along where the water is on the seam binding. So it's slightly damp, it's not wet. And then I'm just going to dip this in the colours, just randomly, so that it kind of looks like that. And then I'm going to take my heat tool and I'm going to dry it off using this. So I'll come back in a moment when I've done that, and I'll show you what it looks like dry. So I just wanted to show you, as it's still warm, I then scrunch it quite hard, and what happens is it ends up all lovely and crinkly. If I just, so you can see how nice and crinkly that now is. So you can see it's so that was its original colour, this off-white, and it now looks like that. Okay, so it's that simple to make your own coloured seam binding. But the reason why I use those two colours is the antique linen gives it that sort of vintagey look, and the old paper has a slight green tinge to it. And so as you can see, there's still a load of ink still on my mat, and I'm going to add to it. I have to be careful because I've just inked this up a little bit, and I'm going to use more of the old paper than I am the antique linen. And in fact I've got the re-inker, so I'm going to use a couple of drops of that as well, and then I'm going to spritz it with the water again. Because that's quite fluid now. Just going to run it about a little bit. Okay, now I've got some more scrap paper because I've not got enough, and I'm going to use some old coffee dyed scrap paper, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to squidge it in the ink, and then I'm going to put that off to one side, get some more out. Just a good way of using up all my scraps. Okay, wet it down a little bit more. To just get rid of that excess ink so that it's not going to waste. So I'm just going to go off and go and dry these papers, and I'll be back again in a second. This particular one didn't ink up as well as I was hoping, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some more old paper some more old paper ink on the mat, add some more water so it's a little bit more concentrated. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to scrunch it up and then open it back out very carefully. And again, dib and dab into the ink. That's a bit better. And just mop up that excess. Now I'm going to dry it again. Another two colours that I like to use for this technique are Wild Honey and Peeled Paint. So we're going to do the same again. Put the colours on the mat. And these make really lovely autumnal colours. And then spritz with some water. Then get out some scraps of papers. I'll take those off and dry them in a second. Scrunch this one up. And we'll add a little touch more water. So again, I'll go off and dry these off, and I'll come back in a bit and show you what they look like once they're dry. I might add some more ink to them first, so I'll keep checking. So that one needs a little bit more colour on it. So I'll go off and do that, and then I'll be back in a second. So my papers are all now dry, and so I'm going to do the next step with these. And I'm trying to use up some of my Stampin' Up products. So I've got this stamping set, which is Painted Harvest, and it's got these leaves in here. So you've got the full leaf and you've got just the veins. Well, because I've already inked up the papers, I only want the vein part really. So now I want to use up some of my Stampin' Up products that I've got, and I've got this one called Painted Harvest, and it's got these two leaves in it. One is to actually stamp the full colour, and the other one is just like the veins of the leaves, which is what I've got on my stamp block here. Now I'm going to use my Ranger Archival ink sepia. Excuse me. I'm just going to ink it up. Let's do it on this one. So we've got a range of colours on there, and then I'll stamp that image on there. Now I've also got the matching punch, and I like this punch because I don't actually need the stamps to be able to use this, but it works really well with the stamped image as well. So if I just line that up, and it gives me a nice effect because I've got some background colour in there as well. So I'll do another one. And again, you can see that it's got a nice array of colours in the background on there. So again, it's something that I like to build up a little stash of. So I'll just do, I want something slightly more green. Without the stamp on it. So you can see, look, it makes a really nice punched image. I've also got this punch as well, again from Stampin' Up, and it's another one that I like to have a small selection of ready. So again, look, you can see it's got that nice array of colours in there. And so again, it's a great way of using up my scraps of tea and coffee dyed papers that I've got bits and pieces of left over. Let's do it down that end where there's a bit more green in. Now I've also got not only those punches, but I've also got my Sizzix dies. So I'm going to cut some of these out as well using these inked up papers. And I purchased myself a little sidekick, a little tiny one, just because I can have it in the video, and it's not very heavy to lift, and in fact it's brand new, so I've not used these pads yet. I'll just bring it back. And so that's the die now, it's all punched out. And as I say, these are great using these inked up bits of paper because they make these look more realistic. So you get a nice array of foliage with colours, and especially with the orange and the yellow one, it's quite autumnal looking. And so I'm going to have a little play with the rest of these now and cut out some more pieces. So I'll come back in a little while and show you what I made. So using the inks, I've managed to make this lovely seam binding, which has turned out really pretty. I'm really liking that. And then from the inks that were left over and me adding a few more inks to them, these were all the punched and stamped pieces, and these were all the die cut pieces that I did from those pieces of paper. So again, just using up some scraps, and also the added benefit of dyeing some seam binding, I've managed to make a nice little collection of some leaves and petals that I can use on some items that I'm going to decorate later on. So my stash, whilst it was rubbish, it is now building up into a nice little collection of useful bits and pieces. So whilst I'm dealing with some of my coffee scraps, what I thought I would do is I'm actually going to print out some words. Now again, this is another Stampin' Up project. This is a Praiseworthy Prose stamp, and it's got almost like dictionary type quotes here. So I'm going to print some of those off on some of those scraps. Now this is a new stamp. I've not even used it. And a little tip that I learned was sometimes when you use a new stamp, it doesn't work very well. So if you get some Versamark ink and put it over the top, and then wipe it off with your hand, it's almost as though it gives the stamp a little bit of a coating to start with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, got a look, see what I've got. And there's a fairly decent sized piece, so we'll put that in and we'll magnetise it down, and then I'm going to choose some of these stamps. Now this is the rubber stamp, so they've actually got a peel off sticky. Oh, that one I've already done that, so that can go there. Next one can be this one. So it's got a little peel off sticky there, and it doesn't matter whether I've got them the right way up or not at the moment. So I'm going to try and stamp several off at the same time, but leaving enough space in between each one so that I can cut them down to size. Do that one. I've had these in my stash for about a year, and you know what it's like, you don't use this stuff, do you? It just sits there. So I'm into using some of my stash up. And one more, I think. Do that one. That might be too long. Let's do that one. And as I say, it doesn't matter if it's the wrong way up, if it stamps the wrong way up. Okay, put the lid down. Make sure they're adhered to my lid. And then I can ink them up. Now I'm going to use, do it that way on, I'm going to use coffee, I think. So I'm going to use my archival ink on these.
So, just inking them up. I'm sorry if the camera's wobbling. I don't want too much ink on because I don't want it to smudge. I need to make sure that I've got enough on.
And then push down on that. And that looks as though they printed out okay, actually. Let's have a look. Yeah, they printed out okay. So now I've got some words. I'm going to do a couple more of these so that I've got these ready to be able to cut up to add again to the projects that I want to make later on. Well, that was a nice little play. I've created quite a few now from just using up my scraps, and I even did some on some of my decorative paper scraps as well. So I've got a nice collection now that I can chop into these as I do a project, and you know, I can decide what I actually want to do with them. So that's my little stash busting video for using up my tea and coffee dyed papers, mainly using up the scraps that I got left over, and I've got a nice selection now ready to use on projects. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.